All right, hey everyone, and thank you for joining the Primal Gut Restoration Reset. A lot of information to break down in this video, so we're going to get right to it. And this is all about digestive health and how it makes a big impact on our overall health. So let's get to it. So we're basically just going to start from the top of the digestive system and go all the way through. So as you guys know, we eat our food, it goes through the esophagus, and then our first area or topic that we're going to talk about is the stomach. Now the stomach is where our hydrochloric acid is, and it has a pH anywhere from 1 to 3. And it primarily is responsible for digesting our food. So if we have that right pH, that 1 to 3, it's very, very good for digesting and breaking down our food to move to the next segment. The other main thing that it does is it helps fight pathogens. So we're talking about bad bacteria, we're talking about viruses, we're talking about parasites. Again, if we don't have enough of this or it's not in the right pH, we start to have this buildup of potential gut dysbiosis. Now, the two main ways that we will get to low stomach acid is through chronic infection. H. pylori is the main infection that you probably have heard of. And what is problematic with that is it secretes ammonia. And when we have a buildup of ammonia, what will happen is it alkalizes our stomach pH, so bringing it up higher than 3, which is not going to help fight pathogens anymore. The other main thing that'll happen is emotional stress. So you'll see during this video, stress is a huge killer of our health, but that's the other main player for decreasing our stomach acid. Now, when it comes to things like GERD, what is actually happening for 90+% of the cases is from too low of stomach acid production. And when this happens, it starts to ferment food in the stomach. And what it'll actually ferment into is lactic acid. And that's the burn that people feel. So if you have chest pain, if you have that burning sensation in the chest, sometimes vomiting can happen. That's a big reason for too low of stomach acid, not too high of stomach acid. And so when people go on these proton pump inhibitors or antacids, as you can see, it's only going to make things worse because we're decreasing that stomach acid production even more. Okay, so the other thing that's important to understand is the sphincters. So the sphincters are what's basically opening and closing at the connections of each organ. So we have one that connects the esophagus to the high point of the stomach, one from the stomach to the small intestine, and then a connection between the small intestine and the large intestine. And these are mainly controlled by calcium. But calcium is mainly controlled by vitamin D. So if we have a vitamin D problem, and as you're going to tell, we're going to talk about that in the gallbladder section, that can create leaky valves, which also can create GERD and other signs and symptoms. And then the last thing to talk about when it comes to the stomach is we have a two-way highway system. So stomach acid and bile heavily are moving with each other. So what will happen is when we secrete hydrochloric acid, what will happen is the liver will detect that, start creating the bile to store in the gallbladder, and then the gallbladder will secrete bile. And the reason why that's important is because bile helps alkalize the stomach acid. So once it goes into the small intestine, we don't want it to be too acidic because that's where it can burn the small intestinal lining and create ulcers and everything like that. So a problem is if we don't create enough stomach acid, there's no sensors or signals to create bile, and now we're not breaking down our fat, so we're not absorbing our fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D that we just talked about. So an absorption problem or malnutrition problem can easily be because of the gallbladder not firing and not necessarily getting enough vitamins and minerals through our mouth. Okay, so we're going to move on to the left-hand side now and talk a little bit more about the gallbladder and bile. So bile, its main reason of getting into the small intestine is to help further break down fat. And once we further break down fat, we're able to absorb cholesterol, which is so important for many functions of our body, including hormones and all that kind of stuff. Now, the other thing too is it helps absorb fat-soluble vitamins. And the main two that we'll talk about today is vitamin A and vitamin D. So just to go a little bit into vitamin A, it's good for our eye health, it's good for our skin, and it also is super important for the tight junctions in the small intestine, which we will get into next. D, we talked about it a little bit with the stomach acid, but what's super important with vitamin D is for our immune system. It really helps mature T regulatory cells, and that has a major impact on gut dysbiosis, the gut lining of the small intestines, etc. The other thing when it comes to bile is, within the bile is bile salts, and bile salts is that next step as an anti-pathogen. So what it's doing is it's going to further attack bad bacteria, viruses, parasites, and it's alkalized. So it's safe in that area. It's not the same as the stomach acidic acid, but what it does is it helps further fight pathogens. Now when it comes to ulcers again, when we have not enough bile coming through the gallbladder and that stomach acid is coming into the small intestines, we can have too much of a burn, and that can damage the integrity of the lining of the small intestines. And so that's a very, very common reason why ulcers will happen, and stress is another one too. Some signs and symptoms of a bad gallbladder: you can have burping, you can have constipation. Diarrhea is also another one, but it's usually more on the constipation side. And a way that we can really get the gallbladder and the bile pumping and flowing right to help our digestion is through bitters. And we will get into bitters on our last whiteboard and break that down a little bit more. Okay, so we're going to move on to our next whiteboard, and we will discuss the small intestine now. So I had to make a whole nother whiteboard. I didn't have enough space. So I have a little illustration here. If you can't see, maybe you can zoom in with your phone. But this is a picture of the lumen of the small intestine. So what it consists of is we have our gut wall, and our gut wall has mucus. And as you've heard before, this is where 80% of our immune system is. And it's pretty much comprised of lymph tissue in that area. Now you can see these little blue squiggly marks on top of the epithelial cells. And these are called microvillas. And what they do is they extract all of our nutrients from the properly digested food after the stomach and after the gallbladder. Now, where we can get into big problems is when we have what's called a leaky gut syndrome. So off to the right, as you can see, there's not tight junctions anymore. They're a little bit separated. So the big problem with that is when you have leaky gut, these macromolecules that will typically never get into the bloodstream, they surpass the lymphatic system, which is where our immune system is able to attack and neutralize everything, and they will just slip through these loose junctions and get into the bloodstream. So if you're somebody that has food allergies or autoimmune, this would be the first thing that I try to treat you for, because it's pretty related to a leaky gut syndrome. Now, what the actual mechanism on how this happens is there's a couple of proteins that were studied. So when it comes to a protein called zonulin, zonulin is the protein that keeps the integrity between the tight junctions. But if zonulin starts to increase too much, this is where the leaky gut syndrome happens. And the number one way that happens is from another protein called gliadin. Now, if you haven't heard of gliadin, you've heard of gluten. So gliadin is the main protein within gluten, and it's pretty much the number one food that will create problems in that leaky gut syndrome. Now, too much inflammation, whether it's from too much sugar, too much insulin resistance, or omega-6 fatty acids, that can slowly create this as well here. So I wrote down a couple of signs and symptoms when it comes to having a leaky gut. I wrote down fatigue, weight gain, headaches, insomnia, anemia, brain fog, food sensitivities, hormone issues, autoimmune, allergies, joint pain, and skin issues. So this little leaky gut thing that we're talking about is not really related just to one thing. It can create tens of hundreds of problems in the body. And that's why this reset is super, super important for our overall health. All right, last one, I promise. So what are we going to do about all this? We will now get into our nutrition and herb protocol. So if you've been in the group for a while, I'm beating a dead horse, but the main three things that we're avoiding during this reset is refined sugar, refined grains, and refined oils. This is the big three that creates leaky gut. Also, no dairy. And we're also not doing alcohol. So no red wine. I know it has resveratrol in it and all that stuff. There's just no alcohol. It's, for one, a diuretic, and also two, it really depletes a lot of our B vitamins and can start to break down the gut lining. A couple other notes. We're going to try to drink half of our body weight in ounces of water per day for many reasons. Hydration is important, but it's also the main component of hydrochloric acid in the stomach and bile in the gallbladder. No water right before meals. We've talked about this before. We don't want to dilute the powerful stomach acid that breaks down our food. We want it to be very potent and properly break down our food for proper digestion. Herbal teas are allowed, and if you want to do black coffee, we're doing no more than 1 cup per day or 1 cup of green tea per day because of the caffeine content and how that can affect other health problems. All right, so what are we eating? So we're going to consume fruits. I can't beat this into your heads enough. Guys, fruit is good for you. If there's a problem with fruit, it means your system is metabolically broken. So if you have diabetes or you have insulin resistant issues, then yes, you can make the argument that fruit might not be the best choice for you. But if you're metabolically healthy, absolutely nothing wrong with eating fruit. Another reason why you should be eating fruit, there's 2 reasons. The collagen production. So in terms of healing the gut lining, a lot of it is mucus and collagen. That's made from vitamin C. Vitamin C is packed in fruits. It's our main antioxidant as well. So if you look at rust in a car, that's oxidation. Fruit is antioxidant, so it prevents aging, and again, just responsible for so many great things in our body, and I'm just sick and tired of it being bashed everywhere that I read up on. Vegetables. Animal protein, fish, leafy greens, healthy oils, and spices. Now, when it comes to fiber, this is going to be something that we're also going to be focusing on. So especially in the beginning of this protocol, we're going to be only focusing on soluble fiber because it's a lot easier on the GI tract. So if your gut is all wrecked, insoluble fiber does not respond very well to it. So when it comes to soluble fiber, in the beginning, what we're going to be doing is carrots, summer and winter squash, all forms of potatoes, turnips, parsnips, beets, and yucca. And if you feel like this is still disturbing you a little bit, at that point, cook it down, allow for easier digestion. And I haven't decided, it's going to be probably week 2 or 3 of the reset, we're going to start to introduce insoluble fiber, and that's things like leafy greens, peas, green beans, corn, peppers, eggplant, celery, onions, garlic, and cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, and cauliflower. And it's the same thing here. Typically when I introduce insoluble, I'll almost always start by doing the cooked or steamed version and then get into doing a little bit of raw there. All right, we're almost done. Some superfoods for stomach acid production. So stomach acid is primarily made of B1, zinc, water, and salt. So getting a good sea salt, red meat, fish, pumpkin seeds, liver, eggs, pork, squash, peas, nuts, seeds, beans, asparagus. Superfoods for bile, saturated fat, so animal protein. It doesn't have to be animal protein, like coconut oil is a saturated fat. And then I'm telling you, it's a superfood, beets. Beets help flush the gallbladder and get that bile moving. I'm telling you, try to eat beets consistently throughout the week. You will obviously realize a major difference with beet consumption. All right, getting into the herbs. So not all these are necessary. You can pick and choose what you want to do personally. But basically, I want you on one form of antimicrobial to attack gut dysbiosis. My personal favorite by far is berberine. I feel like it's the strongest, it makes the biggest impact, and it's also a bitter. So it's not only a nice 2-for-1 for gut dysbiosis, but it's also going to help with gallbladder bile. Another option is neem. There's going to be several options. I'll post them in the group. And then another big one that I want the majority of people doing if you're going to follow the protocol is black cumin oil. Not only for those purposes as well, but also it's one of the best to help heal the gut lining, get those tight junctions back into place. The reason why I like cod liver oil so much is it's a little bit of an upgrade from like fish oil or omega-3 fatty acids because it also has fat-soluble vitamins A and D that we talked about previously. For people that just can't handle doing natural bitters like dandelion and all that kind of stuff, you could do bitter supplements, and I'll link some before we get started. So that's also an option if you just can't handle the bitter taste. And then same thing, if you just don't like aloe or cabbage, these are the main two that also, natural foods that help heal the gut lining. Aloe, a little bit more for the mucus production, which is critical, especially with the immune system. And then if you have any form of ulcers, it is pretty globally known that cabbage is the main superfood to heal ulcers. So again, if you don't like these, I will have supplements that you can do as a replacement. And then just to finish up, I'm going to talk about some labs that if you are interested, so let's say like you know you're a hot mess, like you for sure know that you have gut problems, you have infection, whatever. And if you want to get the most realistic and accurate treatment plan, you're going to want to look into a company called Cyrex Labs. They are the gold standard for functional medicine tests. And I wrote down 3 that you can do your own research and look into. The first one's called Array 2. So what this does is it will show you your LPS and zonulin markers. So remember, zonulin is that protein that, once it's too high, it starts to create that leaky gut, the tight junctions start to go. And LPS stands for lipopolysaccharides. So when we have endotoxemia or gut dysbiosis, LPS starts to increase, and once it gets into our bloodstream, we have a lot of those signs and symptoms that I was talking about earlier. Array 10, food sensitivities. So a couple of the main obvious ones that people will sometimes do an elimination diet with is gluten, dairy, soy, oats, peanuts, and eggs. So if you want to start there, start there. Anyways, we're eliminating a lot of these in our protocol regardless. But when it comes to food sensitivities, if you have a leaky gut, you can react poorly to what we think is healthy foods. Like I had a patient that was responding poorly to strawberries. But the fascinating part is if we eliminate those, we eliminate those food allergies and we start to heal the tight junctions back, we can slowly reintroduce those healthy foods like strawberries and anything like that and have no bad responses. But we also want to always avoid the big disturbers of the tight junctions. Last one is Array 12. So this is going to be telling you if you have any chronic infections or pathogens in the body like Epstein-Barr virus, Lyme, anything like that. So if you guys want to check that out. I'm going to be giving a little bit more details after I post this video into the group on our nutrition protocols week by week. And I'm excited to do this with y'all. So I will see you soon. Thank you.